Welcome back to MMA Al Dente. I am the guy who picked Johnny Munoz Jr. to defeat Daniel Santos. And I'm here to recap UFC on ESPN 46. I will start at the top with Amir Albazi defeating Kai Kara-France via split decision. I think they got this one wrong. I got Kai Kara-France winning this fight. Personally, I had it 49-46. I do think Albazi had a lot of great work done in round 3, the one round that everybody agrees he won. It was a dominant round largely, but still on the feet. And I'm not one of these guys who's married to the numbers. I dismiss those numbers right away, the significant strikes. Yeah, I don't know how you rate a strike. You can tell, like on a scale of 1 to 10, you can probably guess the range of a strike. That was a 3 to a 5. That was a 6 to an 8. But you could never isolate it down to one number. And I think it's just foolish chasing, qualifying strikes. You can quantify them, and that obviously doesn't tell the whole story. But in most cases, I think it does. And I do think Kai Kara-France won this fight. And I do think largely, it was a stand-up affair, and his punches, his strikes were overall more effective. I thought Amir Albazi did not get hurt really at all, in any big moment. I'm sure he's hurting right now, but there were no real big moments. So he had that going for him, and he kept himself in the realm of winning a decision by stalking and throwing as well. I just thought he got the worst of the majority of the rounds. 4 out of 5 rounds, I thought Kai Kara-France won. 1, 2, 4, and 5. But again, Amir Albazi kept himself in that fight. He was throwing down, and he had his moments for sure in the pure stand-up battle. So maybe I need to rewatch this one. I don't know. But I have it in my head it was a bad decision, and that's how I'm going to talk about this fight here. It sucks for Kai Kara-France because, again, I did think he should have won this fight. And this was his first main event slot. It was a big moment for him. He's a guy who's had more high-profile fights, but still this one had a pretty high stakes here, and he lost. So it sucks for him losing a decision like that. And for Amir Albazi, look, you got to give him credit where credit is due. He's tough enough to stay in the fight, tough enough where he didn't get hurt in any big moment, and gritty enough where he threw down to put himself in a realm of winning a bullshit decision, in my opinion. So credit to Amir Albazi. He remains perfect in the UFC, whatever he is now, 6-0, 5-0, I don't know. But he's 17-1 as a pro, and still, the sky's the limit. Good win for Amir Albazi. Alex Caceres, Bruce Leroy beat Daniel Pineda. What you'll hear me say next time is this was a pretty gritty win for Alex Caceres. He conceded position to Daniel Pineda, where I thought Daniel Pineda was beaten out of the fight before he found control in round 2. He secured control in round 2 and made it an even fight going into round 3. And that's where Alex Caceres shined brightest. And he was just all over Daniel Pineda. I was really impressed with Pineda's toughness. He was visibly hurt by body shots. I mean, I've rarely seen fighters show that, display that they were hurt by body shots, as obviously as Pineda was showing it. But he stood in there. He waved the ref off a few times, I think Dan Miragliotta, and he stood in the fight and made it to the distance, which was very impressive. But Caceres was too much for him on the feet. And he was working well on the ground as well, especially in round 1. But overall, Caceres was the better fighter, and I'm glad he got the decision. Daniel Pineda did look limited. He's an older guy, of course, but still a very dangerous guy. He had a few nice moments, in particular a great Kimura, I think in round 2, or maybe that was even round 3, but a great Kimura. And nice triangle attempt, I think, in round one. He was working really well, but in general, he was outgunned here by Alex Caceres. Caceres has been tapped a few times, 5 times, I think, in the UFC, all by rear naked choke. And Daniel Pineda hasn't been tapped in 13 years, I think. So this fight, if it was going to end by submission, it was going to end one way, in my opinion. And Caceres kept himself safe and made this more of a battle of attrition. And he was the fresher fighter, the more healthy fighter, and he pulled ahead over the course of 3 rounds. So it was a gritty win for Caceres. Tough loss for Pineda. He definitely has had his moments, but again, he was largely outgunned here. Jim Miller knocked out Jesse Butler. Look, you can say what you will about this. Jesse Butler had everything going against him, taking this fight on short notice, moving up in weight, and fighting a guy with the most experience and high-level experience of anybody he's ever fought, by far. But still, the knockout is the knockout, and that was the most beautiful knockout I've seen in a long time. Jim Miller is a guy who had 3 knockout wins in his first 49 fights. And one of them was a doctor stoppage, one of them was a TKO over Takanori Gomi on the ground, and the other one was a knockout over Kamal Shalorus in the 3rd round with a step-in knee. Here, though, at almost 40 years old, he'll be 40 very soon, he's gotten 3 knockouts in his last 5 fights. Knocked out Eric Gonzalez, Nicholas Mota, and now Jesse Butler. His left hand, I don't want to make it sound like it's, Crow Cop's left high kick, but it's a very dangerous weapon, and it's a weapon he's cultivated over 20 years, 20 plus years, I'm assuming, of martial arts experience, especially if you count the wrestling. But Jim Miller is, he's not in his prime, but technically he's as good as he's ever been, Jim Miller. And this was exactly what he needed to do here against Jesse Butler. I didn't think he'd look this good doing it. I thought there was a good potential for him getting a finish. Might have been a guillotine choke or something, but getting a 23-second knockout is phenomenal. And again, despite all the circumstances, this is one of his finest highlights and a great moment for Jim Miller. I am a diehard Jim Miller fan, so this was thrilling. No doubt about it. And let me say credit again to Jesse Butler, taking this fight on short notice, all that fucking grit, just the balls it took to fucking step up like this. It didn't work out for him, but I'm sure he's going to be given another shot, and I'm hoping it's at featherweight, and we'll see what he's got. Next fight, Tim Elliott beat Victor Altamirano. This was a fight with a lot of openings for wrestling, which invites a lot of scrambling, and Tim Elliott is just a better wrestler and scrambler. He's the stronger fighter here. That was evident throughout this fight. It was a weird fight, but I'd still call it dominant, or close to it. It was pretty close to a dominant victory. Tim definitely won all 3 rounds, but Victor Altamirano had his moments, just never enough to even win a round, let alone threaten the fight. So it was a tough matchup. This was a fight in which I envisioned a lot of scrambling, and Tim Elliott is just superior to Victor Altamirano when it comes to wrestling and scrambling. He always found top position, was able to wrangle him to the floor on multiple occasions, and once Victor was on his back, he was smothered. He didn't have a lot of room to work with. He was moving better in the first takedown, the first scramble or two, but after that, it was Tim Elliott establishing dominance on the ground, and that's what carried him to a victory. And I'm glad Tim Elliott won with all the horse shit he's going through. He definitely needed a victory, and he got a much-deserved victory here. Another vintage Tim Elliott performance. Karine Silva beat Ketlin Souza. Ketlin Souza suffers her 4th loss, and now all 4 are by finish. And Karine Silva gets her, what'd she have? 16th win, I think. And all 16 are by finish. Karine Silva is a very dangerous fighter. This was a beautiful leg lock. You could see her knee pop. It was like a straight ankle lock, but she had her big thigh wrapped around that knee, which contorted it sideways and really fucked her up. You could see in that slow-mo replay. Great win for Karine Silva. She's 2-0 with 2 first-round submissions in the UFC. And Ketlin Souza, hopefully she recovers and whatever. But once she does, I think she's going to prove to be a pretty good victory for Karine Silva. This was a fight in which a finish seemed likely because both girls are very dangerous fighters, and when they lose, they typically get finished. But seeing a 1-minute ankle lock is still exceptional, especially in these days. The last time I've seen that, I think, was Andrei Arlovsky versus Tim Sylvia, UFC 51. I really don't know when the last time I've seen an ankle lock like that was. It really might have been that fight. But great win for Karine Silva. This girl's very fucking dangerous. 16 out of 16 finishes. I think she's got 9 TKOs or KOs and 7 submissions. Just a fucking killer. And this was a great win. Muhammad Naimov knocked out Jamie Mullarkey. This was that the last fight? I don't know. I think I fucked up the order. But either way, I'll talk about this fight right now. I thought Jamie Mullarkey was winning that fight. I thought he looked really good in that fight, but he got clipped. Like I said in the pre-fight video, Jamie Mullarkey has 5 losses, 3 by knockout, 2 by decision. I imagine if he had 5 more losses, at least 3 of them would be by knockout. Just one of those things where I don't trust his chin, even though he's lost to some really good fighters by knockout. Jalen Turner, Alexander Volkanovski, and then this guy Luke Kudabig, fighting I've never seen. But it just, sometimes the writing's just on the wall. And here he was fighting a guy who had 7 TKO victories in his 12 wins. Heavier hands than most, but had a lot going against him. And one of those things being taking this fight on short notice, he would have weak cardio, or potentially weak cardio. And instead he gets a finish, I think, deep into round 2. But it was a beautiful win. He clipped Jamie Mullarkey with a short right hand, put him down, and then just kept pounding on him. I thought Naimov was losing that fight, but he's a guy who's never been finished as an amateur or pro. And that was, again, on full display in this fight because Jamie Mullarkey was really working him. But he didn't wilt at all. Kept himself in there and threw enough where he ended up catching Jamie Mullarkey. So got a big victory, and no better way to make your UFC debut. And for Jamie Mullarkey, that's a tough loss, but, it's the kind of fighter he is. He's a fucking wild man, and, he wants to kill you, so he leaves himself open to be killed. Eliseo Zaleski dos Santos beat Abubakar Nurmagomedov. That was a very close fight. I think it was a split decision. Really close fight. I thought Abubakar would have been a little more effective with his grappling, with his wrestling, really. And he hit a few takedowns, maybe even a lot of takedowns. I don't remember, but I know Zaleski defended a lot, and he was doing really well. Zaleski was hit early on, clipped, to the point where I think you could say he was even a little rocked in the first minute of the fight. But after that, he pretty much took over the stand-up battle. He was a much more dynamic striker, really made Abubakar pay for some weak entries with violent clinch attacks, Muay Thai knees and everything else. And he was beating him up throughout the fight. I know Abubakar was more beaten up at the end, but it was still a very close fight. Could have gone either way, in my opinion. But Zaleski got the nod. And I'm kind of glad, despite picking against him and betting against him. Because I like Zaleski dos Santos. And he's always been one of the more underrated fighters of his time. Now I think he's 10-3 as a UFC fighter. So he's definitely had an incredible career. Just not a lot to show for it, in my opinion. And this was another, maybe a quiet victory, you might describe it as, but a solid victory for Zaleski. The guy's a workhorse, He's old enough, 37 or whatever he is, but he hasn't shown that he's slowed down at all. So, great win for Zaleski. John Castaneda beat Muin Gafarov. That was an awesome fight, and I've got to credit Gafarov for really fucking throwing down. That guy really impressed me by not fatiguing in round 2, because the way he was throwing, he should have been gassed out in round 1, let alone round 2. But he was still going hard in round 2, and I thought, round 1 was close, but I thought he lost it because Castaneda clipped him with a big head kick, just like he did with Daniel Santos in his last fight. That makes 4 consecutive fights where John Castaneda has rocked his opponent. That's something you'll hear me say next time, no doubt about it. But still, Gafarov made this a battle. He was in Castaneda's face, and not just winning with pressure, when he was doing well, but hurting Castaneda and throwing the heavier shots, the much heavier shots. Castaneda, though, was keeping himself alive and throwing counters, some very well-timed counters, that even though they didn't hurt Gafarov, they made him look kind of foolish, limited in the moment. I feel like those, they score more points for you when you look slicker and you make your opponent look like the desperate fighter. And that's how Castaneda looked at times. But really, this was Gafarov fading. He got clipped with a head kick in round 1, which lost him round 1. Round 2, he attacked like a mad dog, and still he hit Castaneda with a big headbutt, which was the reason he was deducted a point. And my opinion was it was a good deduction, especially after the Bobby Green horse shit with Jared Gordon. You can't lunge in like that. It looked at least semi-intentional, and it was totally deserving of a point being deducted, in my opinion. But nevertheless, Castaneda was the last man standing in round 3. His wrestling won him round 3, and that's only because Gafarov had faded. But Castaneda showed to be a workhorse. His wrestling was there for him. He won a well-rounded fight, and despite the point deduction and whatever, he would have won anyway. He was the better man in rounds 1 and 3. So great gritty win for Castaneda. Not a bad debut for Gafarov, but the point deduction and the loss and whatever, I guess it could have been better. It could have been better. Dontel Mays knocked out Andrei Arlovsky. Andrei Arlovsky's got a weak chin. He's had a weak chin for 20 years. He's done well to protect himself. And here he was doing well to protect himself, but it just wasn't meant to be. Dontel clipped him with a big counter right hand. It was a beautifully timed counter right. Dontel was starting to pull, I can't say pull ahead, but I feel like he was starting to figure out Arlovsky in round 2 after having a really sloppy round 1, in my opinion. But he was beating him up a little bit, down low, up high, and then caught him with a right hand, and Arlovsky couldn't withstand it. I thought Arlovsky was supposed to win this fight, and it looked like he was going to win this fight exactly the way I expected him to, but he's just too weak physically to withstand bad moments against a guy like Dontel Mays. And that's what happened here. Dontel got him out of there, and Arlovsky, now 44 years old, with a knockout loss. I'm sure we'll see him fight in 3 months. What do you want from me? Daniel Santos beat Johnny Munoz Jr. This was a largely dominant victory for Daniel Santos. He pretty much won by taking away the wrestling of Johnny Munoz Jr. I mean, Munoz had a few takedowns, I think, and some nice control here and there, but in general, this was Daniel Santos winning the wrestling battle and stuffing his guard. Daniel Santos wasn't able to be full Daniel Santos, which is a nut job, throwing down like the Tasmanian devil, but he was able to neutralize Johnny Munoz Jr., made him look like a limited jiu-jitsu guy, halfway to Kron Gracie, just a desperado. So, good win for Daniel Santos. I'm sure he'd prefer to get the finish, but it was nice seeing him win in a 15-minute effort against Johnny Munoz Jr. Johnny Munoz, he's got to get better wrestling because that opens up his jiu-jitsu. And on the feet, I thought He was up against it here. He should have lost the battle, but he looked good while he was forced to fight on the feet, Johnny Munoz Jr. Had some physical advantages and, you know, extracted what he could from them, but I can't say he won the battle on the feet. He's got a lot of work to do, but, at least he didn't get knocked out. Elise Reed beat Jinh Fry. This was a pretty close fight, but I think it all comes down to round two. And I thought Elise Reed won round two. I thought they made the right decision. This was a pleasant surprise because normally I expect them to just go with top position. Whoever's on top wins the round. But Elise Reed did some really good work. First of all, standing up in round two, in the first half of round two, she was much better than Jinh Fry. But then on her back, when she was taken down, she was doing a good job creating distance. She was in that half an omoplata position where she hit an omoplata sweep in round one, but then in round two, she didn't want to go for it, but she still created a nice frame for herself where she could strike better. And I thought she was more effective fighting from the bottom than Jinh Fry was on top. Jinh Fry really let that fight slip away, in my opinion, with inactivity from top position in round two. And once Reed got to her guard, she was working pretty well, threatening arm bars and kicking her way to her feet. I thought she looked good. And on the feet, of course, once they fell into a stand-up battle, Elise Reed was much better. Much better. Jinh Fry definitely caught her with strikes throughout the whole fight, even deep into round three. But Elise Reed was much sharper, visibly faster, and just the more comfortable striker. Her straight punches won her this fight. And that and her grappling efforts in round two. So it was a really good win for Elise Reed. And for Jinh Fry, now with 38 or whatever she is, tough loss, but at least she wasn't knocked out. Damone Blackshear TKO'd Luan Lacerda. This was a very impressive win for Damone Blackshear. He had one TKO victory as a pro. This is now his second TKO victory, and he looked damn good doing so. Luan Lacerda insisted on going for leg locks, and he just wouldn't let go, just kept insisting on it. And the old wives' tale, whatever, in MMA of don't hang around on a leg too long, tying up both of your arms. Is that an old wives' tale? I don't know. But either way, that came back to haunt him, and he tied up both his arms and got his face smashed. Damone Blackshear was really good defensively, sitting on his leg, triangling his leg at any moment, because Luan Lacerda kept trying to make him move, rolling around and trying to create some space, and Damone Blackshear didn't give him any space. There was one moment where Luan Lacerda went for like a heel hook or whatever because the knee bar was failing him, and that was the closest he got to a submission, and it was nothing. Damone Blackshear was very heavy on top, took away a lot of his strengths, and pounded him out, getting a big victory. Now Damone's going to stick around, and Luan Lacerda, I'm sure, is going to stick around, but his UFC career, will be on the line the next time he fights. Where it won't for Damone Blackshear. And Philip Lins defeats Maxim Grishin. This was a boring fight, but a fight in which Grishin was just too slow. And you can't fault Lins for not throwing down and making it a wild war. He was winning this fight with speed and roughing up Maxim Grishin in the clinch, which is the exact opposite of what I expected in the clinch. I thought Grishin would have been the bully in there by being the bigger man. And I do think he was the bigger man. He was just the slower man. And at range, I thought Grishin, he was just too slow, where it reminded me of like riding a wave. When you're out in the ocean or whatever. And Grishin was Philip Lins was faster than him. So he couldn't ride any waves. He just had to keep crashing into waves because he didn't have the speed to circle out and the footwork to circle out. So anytime Lins was throwing down, instead of countering and trying to move out and land a well-timed strike, he was going in and trying to get at Linz's hips and attempt a takedown. And that just forced more clinch battles. He did that in every single round. And it was just, Linz's fight. Linz was bullying him in the clinch. And at range, Grisham was never able to get off because Linz was just so much faster. So, overall, it was a relatively shit affair. But a good win for Philip Linz, who's now 3-0 as a light heavyweight. So at least the more exciting prospect, so to speak, won. Can't believe I'm calling these guys prospects. They've been around forever. But good win for Philip Linz. Tough loss for Maxim Grishin. He's a guy who is a lot slower than I expected him to be. And he's going to be up against it against most fighters, just athletically and speed-wise. And that's pretty much it. Like, share, subscribe, all that horseshit. Check out my other videos.